it's kind of like less of a message and more of like kind of a big family meeting about what God's been doing and where we're going. But of course, it is application for any of you, whether it's kind of your first year or you've been here for, lots and lots of time and you've been with us since the beginning, because it's all about what God's been doing and what he's doing currently. But I want to kind of recap and then take us forward today. So just to recap, the last few years of our church has been really, really significant. In 2020, we talked about how we really felt like God was calling us to move forward by faith. In fact, 2020 and 2021 were kind of this 2-year journey that we just called Move Forward. And the reason why is we felt like God, after 10 years of us being like a mobile church, was really getting ready to bless us and increase our influence in this community. Specifically, we were really praying that God would give us our next location, would give us like an actual building we could own so that we can continue to do things better, bigger, continue to grow and expand, and not be limited by what we've been with renting different things. So that was at the beginning of 2020. We said, what we need to do is we believe God's going to bless our church with this next opportunity, but we can't wait until we get there. We need to just move forward by faith. We read the story of Abraham, where Abraham left where he was at and just walked kind of towards an unknown, believing God would meet him there. And we said that. We said, we just want to start believing that God's going to grow our church. And all of this is about this next step. In fact, what we did is we locked our budget. At the time, it was $250,000. Said anything that comes above that for the entire year, if God grows our church, if there's increased generosity, we're just kind of pushing it all to the center of the table, believing that God's going to provide. And we're going to be able to take this step when this building becomes available, whichever one it was. We literally didn't know at the time. There was no yes at the time, only no's. So we started that in 2020. Pandemic, of course, happened. All that craziness. And I'm sure you guys, it's hard to even remember. I totally feel like we went from 2019 to 2023. I don't know what happened in the years in between. It's all this weird blur. It's like trauma or something like that where you don't remember it. But during 2020 and 2021, we said what we wanted to do was focus on this move forward. And by the end of those 2 years, we wanted to raise an additional year's budget, an additional $250,000 to get ready for God when he points at something and says here that we can jump into it. And we didn't meet that goal. We actually exceeded that goal. We finished 2021 with $315,000 of extra income that we put aside and said, this is for us to be able to move forward. It was absolutely miraculous. Maybe even more miraculous is what I got to share last year at this same weekend where we started 2022, where I told you it wasn't just that God made provision, where we were able to give in that way, in such an exciting way, where we were able to be ready for what God was going to do. Last year at this meeting, I got to shake some keys in your face and tell you not only did the church meet that demand, but also then God came through and he took and got us a building that was not for sale. That we identified the best buildings in the area. All of them were no's. This building was always a no, and it never went on the market. And this person said, I'm not interested in selling the building, but I'll sell it to you. And sure enough, we finished 2021 buying our very first building, which we're renovating currently. If you're new here, this isn't our building, actually. This is when we rent. We're renovating a building that's down on First Street, which is going to be like our first actual permanent building. And last year, I shifted our focus. I said, so we were moving forward by faith. Now I feel like we need to kind of refocus our energy. And we went back to the story of Abraham. In fact, in his journey, when he received what God had kind of promised him, said, here's where I've called you to, kind of like God giving us the keys. This is what we looked at was Genesis 13, 15 through 17. Here's God's explanation of what is being given to Abraham. I am giving all this land, as far as you can see, to you and to your descendants as a permanent possession. I will give you so many descendants that like the dust of the earth, they cannot be counted. Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. As soon as Abraham gets there, it's kind of interesting because God says, like, as awesome as your faith was, Abraham, this really wasn't about you. It was about you doing something that's going to bless everyone who comes after you. That actually what Abraham's blessing was legacy. He's like, this isn't just for you. It's going to bless generations after. In fact, there was a hint to this when God actually called him to go. In Genesis 12:3, he says this, I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who treat you with contempt, and all the families of earth will be blessed through you. Whole picture is he's like, I'm not just going to bless you, Abraham. What I give you is going to be a blessing to others. That's going to go on blessing. So I told you last year, our focus was the word legacy. That in 2022, over and over and over again, I kept telling you legacy, legacy, legacy. Legacy is living in a way that outlives you. Instead of just living for today, for tomorrow, for the weekend, for the month, the concept of legacy is getting in your mind, living in a way that someday when you cash out, when you exit this world, your life still has an impact that continues to live on even after you're gone. It's God drawing us to a greater vision than just the immediate right here and now. Instead of building something fast, it's building something that lasts. And I told you, this is the season we're stepping into as a church. I told you, I said, I'm not talking about the building. In fact, I said, we're not building a building, we're building a legacy, right? The goal isn't to build a building. That building is about developing a legacy that blesses our community, increases our influence, where we can continue to serve and be a light inside of this community. And over this last year, you guys took this to heart, and God did amazing legacy things. Not just cool little blessings along the way, but stuff that is legitimately going to shift the community around us. Growth that we saw happen, things that we were able to accomplish. In fact, I would love to give you just a little update because maybe you don't know this, but over 2022, let me show you some of the things that took place that God did as we focused in on building this legacy. When it comes to our weekends exploded in growth. In fact, in 2022, our weekends grew back to being over 300 in average attendance on the weekend. Between our two services, we have over 300 people on the average weekend. Isn't that exciting? Aside from that, in our Acts Kids, in that 300, we have over 75 kids in our first service, in our Acts Kids service, on average on the weekends. Now that's really awesome because that's actually bigger than we were even pre-pandemic. That's the largest Acts Kids has been in a consistent basis. Just for reference, okay, hug an Acts Kids worker if you see them, okay? Because 1 year ago, we averaged 45 a weekend, and 1 year we went from 45 to 75 on an average weekend. Amazing. Our teams grew back to the biggest ever with over 140 people connected to our teams. That's how we do what we do. The people who set stuff up, tear stuff down, run things in regards to it, watch the kids, take care of everything, right? All these different pieces that our teams work on. And at Easter, which is kind of always our biggest weekend where we kind of see our reach into this community, we had 379 adults and 134 kids. So we had over 500 people in our services at Easter. Isn't that amazing? God's opportunity for us to just connect with the people and the people who are connected to us coming in and being part of this. Now, not only that, weekends are cool, but we also did great legacy work in regards to our groups. Because our groups are where people really get to know each other. It's where people get connected. We had 11 different groups that ran in 2022, where over 132 people participated in those different groups. At the beginning of the year, we ran Financial Peace University. It had been the first time we'd ran this in a while. And we had 11 families go through FPU. Check this out. In the course, the few weeks that they were in that course, they ended up paying off $67,200 worth of debt inside of those 11 families. That's legacy changing. That's amazing, isn't it? Not only that, but this fall, in 2022, we got to host the Alpha course again. We host it a couple times a year, but this fall was an interesting marker because it was the biggest Alpha course from beginning to end ever. We had over 50 people go through our Alpha course this fall, which was just absolutely astounding, where people get to really explore those questions of faith. Absolutely, we're cheering for our Alpha coordinator right there. I love it. When we got to summer, we went into the community and we poured into it in an amazing way with Hope Week. Hope Week is where we go and we just make things better. We serve the community. We make communities better. We take care of stuff. We help organizations. When we got to Hope Week in 2022, we had over 265 different people serve. We served in literally projects all over this area, including 4 brand new communities we were able to go in. And this last year in 2022, we set records both in how much we gave and in how much we serve. We ended up giving away $39,364 worth of projects, and we served 2,769 hours in only 7 days. The biggest yet that we've ever done. Can I get some cheers for that? That's insane. Not only that, but it was so cool because we were, during Hope Week this last year, I really felt like so much like we talk about leaving a legacy that really follows behind us was so true because for like one of the first times ever, while we were doing Hope Week, I was getting phone calls from communities and organizations who were saying, is there any way we can get on the schedule for next year? Like, the consistency, the first year we did it was awesome. I mean, a handful of years ago, there's a few hundred hours we ended up serving, and that was awesome. But the potential of the fact that now we're like 7 years in, where our community literally just knows this about the Christians in our area and our church. Like every summer, they just go out and make stuff better. What an amazing legacy to leave behind as the church, right? That the communities just know like, well, every summer those Christians go out and they make everything better. They take care of all the parks and they paint stuff and they fix stuff. And we literally have organizations and communities calling us now to be like, can we be part of that? How awesome is that? Not only that, but we saw lives changed inside of our church. We had 24 new people become owners at our church saying, this is my church and I'm going to make it happen. We had 18 people go through baptisms. In our Acts Kids service, we fill out what's called Yes Jesus cards with kids, where we take them through the gospel and we ask them, would you like to make Jesus your forever friend? Would you like to make him the king of your life? And they can fill out these Yes Jesus cards. We do it with the kids a couple times throughout the year and focus in on it. And we had 101 kids in our services fill out those cards. Isn't that not awesome? 101 children fill out these cards and say, yes, I want a relationship with Jesus. In our services in here with the adults, we had 87 people over the course of the year, either in our services or online, respond to the gospel with a hand raise, filling out a Yes Jesus card, saying yes online, and praying those prayers and asking Jesus into their life. In fact, what's really amazing is on Easter weekend this last year, we had 48 people in one weekend respond to the gospel. Friends, that is miraculous. 80-some people responding to the gospel and taking that into their lives. It's just so amazing, the depth of what God has given us, the opportunity he's given us to serve people and proclaim the gospel in this area. It was like legacy building, like changing in this way. Not only that too, but obviously I said, the building wasn't the focus, but the building is part of what we're doing. Obviously, we're developing this building. We're fixing it up to get ready for what's next. And then this last year, we got to do like legacy work on this building. If I'm honest with you, when we started and as we got going throughout the year, I kind of was a little disappointed because I wanted to go faster. But I told you at the beginning of this year, I was like, God's saying, build something that lasts, not build something fast. And as soon as we got in there, it was like, okay, there's going to be some changes to what we're going to do to build this in a way that lasts. We did do some fast. I mean, one of the cool things is we did not even expect to be in that building this entire year. We had renters that were in it, and we expected that sometime this year in 2023, we would be able to move into it. Change of circumstances, we were able to actually move our headquarters, where we do Alpha, students, everything, to that building halfway through the year. In August, we moved everything over there and got it set up, which God's provision once again. We literally had the biggest Alpha course ever, which would have barely fit in our old facility. God made a way that we were able to run it in our brand new building. So it's cool because even though we are doing this long run of the building being built out, the whole front of it is being used as our office, as our meeting space for Alpha, for our students on a regular basis. So that actually came early, which is pretty cool. But when it comes to the building, it's pretty interesting because we got in there and God did like legacy work of giving us opportunities to really, really build something that lasts. In fact, as we got in and we looked around how the building laid out and how it was set up, we realized right away one of the first things we needed to do was buy the property next door. Not for sale. Owner, not for sale. But then it was for sale and sold to us because God did work inside this person's heart and changed the circumstances. And it was so cool because of the whole generosity where we said like, hey, we want to move forward by faith and be ready for when God says here. This is what was so cool. We realized we need this property. The person said yes, and we literally just wrote them a check for the property. Because we had that money in the bank because of your guys' generosity who gave to this opportunity. We didn't have to go seek a loan or anything. We could literally just write them a check and say, here, we'll purchase the property so we can immediately renegotiate the building, which is really cool. It let us restructure the entire layout of the inside of the building. That's way better for the long run. Extra cool for all of you who have youngins or all of you who help with Acts Kids, it let us redesign our Acts Kids hallway and wing so that we're actually going to have an outdoor area for our kids that's built onto the building, so they have an outdoor play area connected to our building now because of this. So again, like right now, you're like, I don't see it. You're like, no, this is legacy, long run as far as where we're getting, instead of right now getting that progress. But the other thing that happened is we got into that building, and as we started looking at the floor that was in the main section of this building, people who know concrete were like, it's unusable, like terrible. I was like, well, man, like, we didn't really expect to be tearing out all this floor. Is there something we can do? And everyone who knew this area of like construction and concrete who are connected to us was like, no, it's a do-over. And that's $80,000. And it was like, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to build something fast? Like, well, just build on it, just use it. Or are we going to build something that lasts? And we realized, like, you got to start with a solid foundation. You can't skimp on like the first step. So it's like, well, no, like we're going to invest in actually fixing this from the bottom up so that we can actually put brand new concrete in this facility for our areas, our Acts Kids, the main areas. And not only that, but really cool, because of this, it means that we could upgrade to the fact of actually having like in-floor heat in this whole area, make it way, way better for the long run of the building. Again, the whole idea of legacy. And then we were also able to go in and demolish the building that was next door to clean up that property that was connected. So now all of a sudden the building has its own freestanding structure. It is way, way, way better. Now, the reason why I say all that is because when I got into this year, I was like, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And I was immediately thinking fast, but I realized when God saw that project, he's like, legacy. Do the end things first, and then you can fill in the short run things, right? Do the legacy stuff first. Here's why I say all this, because this last year was marked by legacy. Some of you participated and you saw some of these things and you were part of these. And when you see God move like this, what I always want to remind you is the reason why God moves in this way where you see him is so that you can recognize that it's him who's doing it. In fact, I told you this. I want you to become people who build something that lasts with your life. I don't want you to just be people who get forgotten when you disappear from this world. I want you to invest in something where it's like your life really mattered, even after you're gone. And I told you there's a secret to this. In fact, there's a secret. If you want to leave a legacy, you want to be like, I don't want to just waste all my time and money on the short run. I want to invest in a way my life, my time, my energy into something that actually is going to continue to bless people after I'm gone. I told you, here's a really clear secret. You find something God is doing, and then you join it. That's the secret to finding something that's actually going to last, that you can lend your energy to. And the reason why God does these things is so we can be for sure this is God. In fact, some of you guys have already heard the story. I've told it multiple times. I'm going to tell it again because I like it, okay? So if you've already heard it, too bad. I'm going to tell it to you again because I think it's so powerful to remember. We were in this 2-year journey of getting ready to buy this building, right? And we didn't know what building it was. Again, we were just giving and believing God was going to give us a building. And in December of 2021, one of my friends named Tyler calls me out of the blue at 7 a.m. He's another pastor in this area. He says, Cameron, really strange. I just had this dream last night. I felt like I had to call you, right? He's like, this is weird. He doesn't usually call me at 7:30 a.m., right? He says, I had this dream, and he said, you guys finally found a building. It was crazy. And he says, we were walking through it, and you were talking about how it was such a great building for your needs. And it was going to be a really long process, probably a couple years that you were going to be building it out because of the work it needed. But he said you got it for around, $500,000. And it was really, really cool. But he says it was neat because we walked outside, and you pointed across the street and said, there's a bar right across the street, too. And there's people who used to spend time at that bar who now are in our church. And he's like, I don't know what any of that means, but I just wanted to tell you that story because he's like, when I had this dream, it was so vivid. I don't know what all it means. It was funny because I hadn't talked to him about where we were at in this progress at all. In fact, I hadn't told anybody because we were 2 weeks away from signing a contract for a building that wasn't for sale. So I didn't want anyone to know a building was for sale. No one knew about it. And I said, I'll tell you what it means. I said, we're 2 weeks away from literally signing the contract on this building. We found it. We secured it. I said, it's going to be a 2-year renovation. And I said, I told the bank, we bought it for $375,000, and the middle section is having a $225,000 remodel, $500,000. And he's like, this is insane. There's no way. And I said, wait, hold on. I said, it gets crazier. I said, it's on First Street, and when you walk outside, I said, you don't know this because you're not from LaSalle, but across the street is kind of a notorious bar named Doc's. And he was just like, what? What? You see, the reason why God does stuff like that is so you can know when it's him moving. That it's not just you who's making plans for your life or making plans for us as a church, that we're just doing the next thing. That God does something confirmed to go, this is my work. And when we find something that God is doing, that's the opportunity we have to be able to say, and I want to be a part of what God's doing because that's something that's actually going to last. Let me tell you even more, okay? Because this last year, in 2022, has been a testimony of God's faithfulness to show that he's the one who's doing this work. You guys were amazing and you guys were generous. That's awesome. But let me show you a little bit about what God's done in this last year as we started into this process of saying we're going to take and we're going to make this place a place that's going to be focused on the presence of God. That concrete project that we got, initial estimate, $80,000. 2 different guys who go to our church who work in concrete said we can figure out something better. One of them contacted his friend who also runs a construction company, a concrete company. He's his father-in-law, actually. They came and they cut, hauled, and removed the entire concrete floor for free. 0. The other concrete worker said, I can figure out how to pour this floor, he says, for less than what they're saying. He says, I'll give you a deal because it's the church. Not only that, but he said, if you have guys who are strong, I was like, we have that. He's like, they can do the grunt work, I'll do the finish work, the really complex stuff. And he says, I think we could pour that concrete for about half of what it's supposed to be. So instead of $80,000, it's very likely this year we're going to finish this floor at the beginning of this year for about $40,000 instead. We got into this property and I started laying out everything that was going to happen, everything we had to purchase, all the different materials. And I immediately had this cascading fear where I realized this is too much money. Like, this is way too much money. Building materials in general, if you're built anything right now, terrible, right? Everything got insanely expensive and commercial products are crazy expensive. And I was just like, this is too much. God, we need to figure out a way how we can be more creative to be able to finish this build out in the next couple of years. So I'm at this season right now in my life. I have 4 kids who are 6 and under. Pray for me and my wife, right? And at the time, I was putting my son Levi to bed, and I'm in that season, some of you have been parents, where you get the fun job of sitting with a kid until they fall asleep, right? So you just sit in the dark and think and wait, right? And as I'm there doing that, I was just like, God, there has to be a solution where we can figure out a way to do this in a better way, in a cheaper way, in a creative way. All of a sudden, I just had this thought rocking into my head. What about that old Waltham school? Because we had done Hope Week the year previous in Utica, and they had mentioned to me how they were getting something out of this school, the city of Utica was. So because of Hope Week, our connections, I literally have the cell phone number, call one of the leaders in Utica. Hey, are they still tearing that down? Yeah, here's the number of the superintendent. Give it to me. Call her. Hey, are you guys tearing down the school soon? And they go, yeah, it's literally being torn down in 10 days. I said, well, is there anything else in it? Is there anything that, we're doing this commercial build out. Could we go look? And they're like, yeah, be our guest. It's going to be torn down. Everything good was already taken out of there. We went in there, friends, and we immediately called everybody we knew. And we're like, come here now in these next 7 days. And over the course of those 7 days, legitimately, we walked through this place. And the most conservative estimate is that we pulled over $50,000 worth of materials out of this building. We walked in and we're like, that's all brand new drop ceiling. Let's take that. We walked in and we're like, these are brand new commercial doors. Let's take those. We walked through, one of the guys, an electrician, he's like, did somebody claim all these electrical boxes? We're like, no. He's like, this is thousands of dollars. I'm taking all this stuff. So we pulled all this stuff out. We literally were able to pull out, and someone in our church was willing to give us a place to store all this. But we literally pulled out over $50,000, maybe $75,000 worth of equipment that we would be buying in doors, in windows, in materials for that building. God gave it to us for free. How amazing is that, right? We decide that we're going to go into this place in the second half of the year. And we're going to start Alpha. But the problem with Alpha is you got to have a kitchen. We weren't planning on building our kitchen until this next year when we finished the center section of the building. So we had to hustle, be like, we got to put in a kitchen. We got to buy all of our equipment right now instead of in the future. We called John Sales and Service because they've hooked us up in the past and helped us out. And we're like, we have like 30 days to get all this commercial equipment. Like, supply chain is really tough. Like, is there any way you can figure out how we can get this stuff so we can run our Alpha course? And they're like, we'll work on it. Sure enough, they got it all figured out, got it all installed in those 30 days before it was going to start Alpha. And then after it was all installed, they said, by the way, don't worry about paying us for it. We'll just give it to you guys for free. There's $8,000 worth of commercial equipment for a kitchen. Don't worry about paying for it. It's all good. You got it, right? Insane. When we get to the center section of this building and we redesigned the layout of it, we decided to go all the way down to the subgrade and completely redo all the plumbing. We had to contact people who are architects and people who are designers and people who figure out plumbing plans and all these different pieces and invite them to, can you design this, how we're going to lay out this plumbing, and go to talk to people who are architects, and can you figure out life safety and egress and how all this works, and working with them. And sure enough, along the way, we just figured, obviously, these were going to rack up some pretty significant charges. And at the end of all of it, all of those professionals who served our church in that way waived their fees. We guess over $10,000 worth of professional fees in designing, in plumbing, and life safety. Zero. Not only that, we go to tear down this building that's connected to this building because we want to be able to gain access to change our egress to get ready for this. And this tear down of this building, it's a small building, but we talked with the inspector who was going to do this stuff for asbestos, and he's like, this is probably like a $40,000 to $50,000 teardown is what I would guess. And I was like, well, we can't do that. That's way too much money, right? Like, we need to pray and we need to have some solutions. So we start praying and asking inside of our church, and sure enough, we had somebody in our church who has equipment who tore down that building for free. They brought their equipment, their excavators, and tore the entire building down. We had people who volunteered to help to do the grunt work. Then, one of the other people who are connected to our church, who owns Humpty Dump, they took and donated their drivers and their dumpsters to us to be able to haul away all the material of it. All we had to pay for was disposal. And then on top of that, the city of LaSalle gave us a free place to put all of our concrete after that pulled out, so we didn't have to pay for this. So what should have been legitimately a $45,000 bill turned into only an $8,000 bill to tear this entire building down. Here's why I say all this. Listen, just in 2022, God has already saved us over $145,000 on this project. Yeah. We see God's hand move. This is why I say, like, to you, like, this is how we know. This isn't just our, like, guessing at stuff, right? Like, look at what God is orchestrating and pulling together to make this a reality. And as I've said before, the reason why God does this is so we can know, we can identify when we see God doing something so that we can become a part of it and we can lend our energy to something that's going to last because we see God's moving and we say, we're going to jump in with it. I need you to get this, okay? Because right now you might just be part of this church. You're like, yeah, this seems cool. This is cool. And you're just kind of like, yeah, going along with this. I need you to understand that right now around the United States of America, there are tons and tons of churches that this message at the beginning of the year is talking about how they're going to shut down parts of their church. They're talking about how their budget has shrunk since COVID, how giving is down and attendance is down and there's not people and we don't know what to do and we can't make this. And there's churches that this year that they're going to be closing the doors. They would say this is the last year and it's over. And I need you to get the fact that here in the Illinois Valley of what Acts Church has been called to, we are facing the exact opposite problems. That we're trying to solve too many people, too many kids, an increased budget, increased opportunity to build, increased opportunity to leverage into this community. I need you to get the fact that this is unlike just the norm in regards to the fact that what you're experiencing is seeing a move of God. Where you're seeing God move and there's this opportunity to become part of it, to walk along with it and watch as God does miracles. So here we are at the beginning of 2023. Where do we go from here? We aren't done with this journey. I told you in 2022, we're not building a building, we're building a legacy. And that same vision is true. The same vision is true. We're building a legacy as a church. We believe we're supposed to increase in influence. We're supposed to continue to bless this community like never before. But in the last year, I don't know if you noticed, obviously, my big focus was that word legacy. Legacy, legacy, legacy. In fact, some of you, you're tired of it. You're like, Cameron, legacy, everything, right? But I'm hoping it sticks with you. Legacy is living in a way that outlives you. Legacy is living in a way that outlives you. Legacy is living in a way that outlives you. That you can never get that out of your head. That you think about your life and you think, don't just build something fast, build something that lasts. But as I was thinking about that vision, that same one that we're walking in of building that legacy, what I felt like God did is he took my eyes from that word legacy and he shifted it back to that word building. He said, we're building a legacy. And where this last year God put so much emphasis of us looking at that word legacy, of understanding what it's like to live like that, I feel like God pushed back and then said, but what I would love for you to look at this year is build. Build. You see, because legacy is the goal and build is the way we get there. Legacy is a noun, but build is a verb. It's an action we take. And then I feel like what God's saying is like, this year in 2023, this isn't a year of like contraction or reaction. This is a year of action. That I am moving in this area and I'm inviting you to become part of what I am doing in this year. I'm inviting you to build, to actually create something this next year, to build something inside of your life. If I may, some of you have been approaching faith like it's a noun. You've been thinking faith is like this noun, like we're going to talk about faith, and I have faith. It's this noun, this thing. And what I'm saying is I think what God is saying to our church is like, I want you to shift your thinking into realizing faith is a verb. Faith is something that you do and you live out. It flows from you. It interacts with the world around you. That we wholeheartedly believe as a church, faith without action is dead. That's what God's word says in James. That we're meant to actually live out our faith and that God is calling us as a church communally, but I mean each and every one of you to shift your thinking in regards to this next year of going, I'm going to be active and actually make my faith a verb this next year. I'm going to build something. In this next year, you're going to build something. But I would encourage you to build something that lasts. I looked up that word build. Really interesting. Let me show you these definitions. There's two definitions. And I think it's so cool to think about where you're going into this next year. The first is to form by ordering and uniting materials by gradual means into a composite whole. That's what we're doing at 944, right? At that building, we're ordering and uniting materials by gradual means to create a composite whole, right? Concrete, nails, drywall, HVAC, and it's all going to come together to create a space where we can take and we can make God well known. But the second definition makes me think about you, makes me think about me and where I'm going with my faith this next year. If I think about what am I going to build, it says this, to develop according to a systematic plan by a definite process on a particular base. Think about that. It says that building is a systematic plan. Like you actually put together a regular and thought out plan for what you're going to do. And it has a definite process, which means there's a decided, clear goal that you're gradually moving towards. And it says that it needs to be built on a particular base, which means a distinct and chosen foundation for this next year. That you are called to build something in your faith. In fact, Paul said this exact same thing. Paul was writing to the church of Corinth. And the church was growing. There was a lot of bickering. There were some big names. Paul and Apollos were two of them. And he talks about what they're doing in the church. And listen what he says in 1 Corinthians 13, 9-6. He says, for we, meaning him and Apollos, are both God's workers. You are God's field. You are God's building. Because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder. Now others are building on it. But whoever is building on this foundation must be very careful. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one that we've already laid, Jesus Christ. Anyone who builds on that foundation may use a variety of materials: gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. But on the judgment day, Fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. If the work survives, the builder will receive a reward. But if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer great loss. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through a wall of flames. Don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God lives in you? He says, I laid the foundation. There's no conversation on the foundation. It's Jesus. He's the foundation of faith. But he says, now we have to decide what we want to build on that foundation. And he says, you're going to build something together, and then someday when you exit this world, when your life is over, you will go to the judgment seat of God. And he says, everything that you've built will be tested. It will be run through kind of like this refining fire. And he says, some will stand the test of time, that was a legacy-minded thing you built, something that withstands that test and has eternal value. But he said, then some, he says, it's just going to be consumed and burnt up. There'll be nothing left. He says, in fact, it'll be great loss. I do love the fact, he says, the builder will be saved. Don't get that twisted. He says, we're saved by grace, right? And faith in Jesus Christ. We're not saved by what we build. But he says, it'll be like somebody who is saved from a fire, but when they look back, they realize their entire house has been burnt to nothing and there's nothing left. They spent their whole life building something that didn't have eternal value at all. And he says it'll feel like great loss in that moment. You see, what Paul is saying is each of you have to build something on top of your faith. And what I believe that God is inviting us into in this next year, the season that our church sits in, is God is inviting you in this next year to build something that will actually last. Not just build some fun, not just build some money in a bank account, not just build some more clientele, not just build, another, few experiences or whatever we might try to put into our life, but would you build something that's actually going to outlast you? Would you put your energy and time and money into something that really matters? I told you before, the secret to finding something that lasts is finding something God is doing and joining it. I love Matthew 16, 13 through 18. Jesus tells us what he's interested in building. He explains it to his disciples. Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked the disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? That's Jesus' name for himself. Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And then he asked him, but who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. He's like, that is a revelation from God. You didn't learn this from any human beings. Now I say to you, you are Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. In this moment, he asked them, who do people say I am? And Peter says, you are the Messiah. It's really interesting if you read this verse in the original writing as far as what it was written in. It gives us reference to what he's really saying here, because people will actually misread this verse as saying, like, Peter's the rock. Peter was called the rock, but it's funny because in this moment, he says, your name's going to be Peter, and he calls him basically what he calls him is pebble. You're going to be a pebble. And then he says, but on this rock, and the word he uses is basically this giant mountain. He says, I will build my church. You see, the foundation that he was going to build the church on wasn't Peter, the body. It was Peter's confession that Jesus was the Messiah. He's like, you're a pebble, but what you just said was a revelation from God, and that's the rock I'm going to build the rest of the church on. The foundation of the church isn't a person. It's a belief that I am who I say I am, that I am the Son of God. And he says, I'm going to build a church on top of that even the powers of hell can't stop. I'm going to build a church that even when the devil tries, he can't destroy it. Jesus is interested in building a church that will consistently influence this world, share his gospel, share his truth, share his love. And listen to me, friends, as you look forward into 2023, and I invite you to think about what you might build this next year, what you might develop, what you might create and put together. I feel like Jesus sent me here today to offer you an invitation. You don't have to take it. You can build whatever you want on this faith. But I feel like in this next year, with where our church is in the season we are, like Jesus said, what I need you to do is just go and offer an invitation to these people that in 2023, instead of just building your own kingdom, instead of just building your own glory, instead of just building your own success, would you build my church instead? Would you take and make this focus of this next year about building something that really lasts? Where you see God moving, of saying, I want to be a part of that, and I want to contribute to building something that lasts. I want to help build God's church in this area. I want to build something that truly will last. Now, I need you to get this. I'm not talking about the building. I'm not talking about give money to the building, give time to the building. That'll be part of it, but it's so much bigger than that. When I say Jesus is inviting you to build his church, I mean his church. We are his church. To build what really affects this world and this community. That building is one little tiny small part of it. I mean, as awesome as it is for God to be able to give this, and he's obviously doing that miraculous work because there's a benefit of being there for sure in regards to what comes next. The building has never directed our church. I mean, if the landlord kicked us out tomorrow, I'd call all of you and be like, we're meeting at Jerry's house next week, and it would suck for Jerry, but we'd all meet up, right? Because it's like, building doesn't matter. Like, we're the church. There is no Jerry, by the way. He doesn't exist. That was just for reference. Is there a Jerry out there like, not my house, oh my God. But in 2023, what I'm saying is God is moving and God is building. When we look at all this in this last year, when we look at the last 2 years before that, what I'm saying is, do you not recognize the evidence that God is obviously building, right? Like he is working and he is doing this. And what he's inviting us into, I believe, in this next year is shifting our perspective into our faith becoming a verb and joining in with him and saying, this year I will build his church. Now, how can we do that? Let me just show you real quick, because this isn't just one message and we're done. We're going to spend the rest of the year fleshing this out and what this looks like. But just real quick, what would building his church look like? First of all, it could be building yourself. You do realize that you're the church, right? In fact, in 1 Corinthians 13:16, it says, don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God and the Spirit of God lives in you? You're literally the house of God. You're the house of God. So you to recognize the fact that, I can't just be so passive in this. I need to build his church. Part of it is you. You might realize, this is the year I'm not going to be so passive in my faith. I'm going to actually make a plan. I'm going to make a goal. I'm going to make sure that I actually walk in this path, and I develop this. It's going to be reading his word or praying or spending time with him or getting connected in this way. And we're going to help you develop this. In fact, next week, I'm going to talk all about this next weekend of helping you get started in the right direction this year. But the reality of saying, if I'm his church, I need to work on this, right? There is sin that needs to die, and there is grace that needs to grow inside of this heart. But I'm going to be active about it this next year. I'm going to build his church. Second, you might build each other. Hebrews 10:24-25 says this, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. We're the church. Building his church might be the reality of you saying, I'm finally going to open up my life to other people. When we talk about groups and we have these opportunities, I'm going to actually be part of a group. Or maybe you've been part of groups. So you go, I'm going to lead a group for the first time ever. Because we need more groups. We need more group leaders. I'm going to lead a group and I'm going to leverage my life to bless other believers' lives. I'm going to loan them my faith. I need you to get this as a church. We're a credit union of faith. When you don't have faith, someone around you is supposed to lend you some of theirs. And when they don't have faith, you're supposed to lend them some of yours. That's what the church is. And you say, I'm gonna build his church. I'm gonna clear some time in my schedule to invest in other people, not just be so selfish about me. It's one of the things people do really bad with faith. It's always like, me, God feed me, God develop me. And it's like, go and bless someone else. That's what Jesus did when he was here on this earth. Who are you serving in the church? Who are you investing in their life? We're gonna start groups in just another month. There's an opportunity to join, an opportunity to lead. Third, you might build more of his temple. This one sounds silly, but think about it. You might build more as far as add on to his temple. Who's the temple? Jesus, right? Excuse me, sorry, yes. Jesus is the foundation. We are the temple. Thank you. Yes. And you might build the temple bigger. That means adding new people. In fact, in Ephesians 2:19 through 22, Paul was talking to the Gentiles. No one thought they were going to be Jesus followers. They figured it was all just going to be the Jews. And he says this, now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You're citizens along with all of God's holy people. You're members of God's family. Together, we are his house, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, and the cornerstone is Jesus Christ himself. We are carefully joined together in him, becoming a holy temple for the Lord. Through him, you Gentiles are also being made part of this dwelling where God lives by his Spirit. I need you to make sure you get this, okay? We believe the gospel still works. We do not believe you either are or are not a Jesus follower, like where you're raised a Christian or you weren't. There's all those people, they're so crazy, they couldn't possibly know, about Jesus, right? It's like, no, we believe the gospel still works for your mom and dad, for your son and daughter, for your neighbor, for your coworker, for the person you go to school with. The gospel still works, and no one is ever too far away for Jesus to touch their life and warm their heart and draw them back to connection with God. That we believe the gospel still works, and part of your job is to build his temple, to build his church. Not just reactively walking through your life, but starting this year and going, who does God want me to love and invest in? Who in my family, who in my circles doesn't know the love of Jesus? And who would God direct me to go notch out time, notch out energy, notch out finance, and spend time investing in this person's life? Because they need a Jesus follower shedding light into their life to show them that God loves them and wants a relationship with them. And actually building it, like saying, I'm going to build it. I'm going to add a stone to the temple by the end of this year in seeing God move in people's lives. I'm going to do my part, and I believe God's going to do his part. And last, you might build his kingdom. And this is the big scan of everything. In fact, if I may, this is really the first decision we have to make is your life going to be about building your kingdom or about building his kingdom? This is really the first decision you have to make. Is your life about building your own brand, your own joy, your own experience, your own heaven right here on earth? Or is your life about building his kingdom, doing what you see him doing and joining with it and investing your time and your energy and your money into that and saying, my life, what I have is going to be directed towards joining what God's doing and building his kingdom. That's actually my goal. This would be a multitude of things. The church, obviously, building different stuff we've been doing. We talk about like giving time, giving energy, giving money, all these pieces. But you have to decide, and listen, I love this one time where Jesus was talking to his disciples and they were worried about what their life was going to turn out like, what they were going to build on their faith. This is what Jesus says when he looks at his disciples in Matthew 6, 31 through 33. Don't worry about these things, saying, what will we eat? What will we drink? What will we wear? These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, but your heavenly Father already knows all your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. He says, if instead of making your life about your kingdom, you focus in on my kingdom, and you say, I'm going to leverage my life to build his kingdom, he says, I'll take care of everything else you need. Everything else you need, your life won't constrict. In fact, it will expand and it will become even more. And this next year, we have a multitude of things that we're going to do in the community. Multitude of things we're going to do, getting that space ready down there, of building it out and creating it. In fact, again, we're locking our budget at our new budget of $375 so that any money that would come in above that, any giving that would come in above that, any growth that would come into our church would go towards the idea of preparing that place. But I just need you to get this. Listen. Again, the building isn't the goal. The reason why I believe Jesus is inviting us in this next year to say, would you build my church? Would you give effort and energy into developing, strengthening, and building my church? Sure, a location that's going to be used for his glory, but also a foundation of people, a whole series of groups and teams and the ability to be able to expand and serve and reach into this community and all this. Friends, the reason when I look at this and I think about everything that God's done and where we are in this invitation, why it just all makes sense to me is because I believe God is getting ready to do something even greater. God doesn't give gifts to his people so that they might be buried. In fact, there's a story where he does that. He gives people gifts and he comes back and one of them just buried him in the ground and didn't use it, and he calls him wicked. He says, you're supposed to use everything I give you. And think about what God has done in the last few years to be able to increase our influence and give us a facility we can do a better job with running all the things that we do in this community out of it. Our weekends, yes, but everything else we do as well. You see, I think the reason why God in this moment is asking us and inviting us and saying, would you build my church, is because God is getting ready to take and bring a multitude of people who are going to need a good church to be part of. Friends, I believe we sit in an interesting place in our community, and I believe God already is moving. I believe that there is a multitude of harvest that is coming, and there are people who are going to need a church. But that means they need a space, and that means they need a group, and that means they need a service, and that means they need a team, and that means they need a friend. And in order for that church to be there and ready for them, we have to build the church. A little over 10 years ago, a handful of people said, we're going to build the church. And it was pretty raw, and it was pretty sketchy. It was meeting in the Knights of Columbus and a handful of chairs that we'd borrow and no budget in this, but it's like, hey, we believe people are coming and we need to build his church. And I'm telling you, friends, I think we sit at the exact same season once again. That God is inviting us to say in 2023, would you build my church? Would you look at this next year and instead of focusing on your own glory, would you say, what would God have me to do to contribute to how he's moving here and now? I can't deny the evidence that he's moving, that he's building. So if I want to do something that's going to last, I want to join alongside with what he's doing and be part of it. Would you build something that lasts this next year? Would you pray with me for a second? God, I pray in this moment that you would help us find what's next. We're going to spend the whole year working this out, and we got time. But I pray that even just right now in this moment, I pray that you would begin to just speak to the hearts of your children. To any of us who say that we love you and you are our God, I pray that you would just individually whisper this same invitation you had me bring here today. Would you build my church? And then maybe you would just begin to, even right now, begin to bring clarity into what that looks like. Is it developing themselves, saying it's time that I shift my faith into gear and I have to build his church and I'm his church? Maybe it's also that community part. Maybe you're just drawing people to go, I need to open up my life. I need to become part of what we're doing here in our groups and serving other people. Maybe, Lord, it is the idea of right now you're putting names and faces on hearts of people who are lost and do not know you, Jesus. And that we wouldn't just live reactionary to that. We would think, this is the year I'm going to really invest time. I'm going to help build his church. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to pray and I'm going to serve and I'm going to go and I'm going to be part of that person's life and keep showing them the goodness of God. Or maybe, God, it is just that big picture of saying, are you going to be part of my kingdom? Is that what you're going to be about instead of your own? Maybe it is the serving and the helping and the going to be part of what we're building out with this building, or the giving to support where we go next in regards to developing this. Obviously, God, you can provide for all of it, but when you invite us to be part of the energy or the money behind it, it's where we get to actually contribute and see that we're part of building something that lasts. And maybe in this next year, you're just pulling us into that of saying, would you build my church first? God, I pray that you would make it clear in our minds. And I pray, God, that we would get to watch in 2023 as you do what only you can do. And as we join you, we would get to watch as the church is built, and we would get to be co-laborers with you. And we would see that we are building something that truly does last in this miraculous season we are in. Jesus, I thank you so much for your goodness. In your name we pray. Amen.